Any fisherman will tell you that no trip out on the open ocean is ever the same. The murky waters are still full of mysteries and secrets yet to be uncovered, and you never know what strange objects of creatures can suddenly appear in your fishing nets. This, on top of the fact that the open oceans can be some of the most challenging environments to tread. It can go from as calm as a night in a village to as rough and dangerous as Detroit City at New Year. This is why most fishermen are at least somewhat relieved when they can head back to shore after a couple of long and hard days of fishing. But when this fishing crew encounters something they would have never expected on their way back home, none of them hesitate to spring into action immediately. The fishing crew aboard the Golden Delight has experienced this to the fullest extent. But what they found in the water might just make it all worth it. Before we start our story, smash the like button. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. They have been out on the open ocean for going on almost 2 full weeks now. This is a lot longer than normal, but they barely managed to catch anything the first couple of days, and they could not afford to return to the harbor empty-handed. These hard-working people don't have a lot of cash just saved up for days on which they would return empty-handed. Being a fisherman is a difficult and dangerous job, but it sadly doesn't have a salary that is keeping all of this in mind. The main problem is that due to overfishing, there are often days where a lot less profitable fish is caught compared to just a couple of days ago, metaphorically and literally. Thus, they decided to change strategy and head further out, in the direction of waters that they knew as had less traffic of other fishing boats and would thus increase their chances. It took them a while to get there, but luckily their efforts were not in vain. They found a large patch of open water completely absent of other fishing boats, and thus they had no competition. The first time their nets touched the water, they knew that there was a large chance they had struck gold, especially when they started pulling it in. The net was tougher to pull back in than it had been in almost a year, probably. With a lot of effort, they managed to get it on board and gazed in awe at the incredible mass of fish moving frantically on the deck of the ship. The first net was full of fish. They managed to catch the largest amount of fish they had ever got on a single fishing trip. The storage space was completely packed after only 2 days of fishing in this spot. The crew was overjoyed and were celebrating with every haul they got on board. Their luck just seemed to know no bounds those 2 days. Besides all the fish they hauled in, they also saw some other amazing animals out on the open waters. But the whales that pulled up beside their ship must have been the most spectacular by far. With the storage of the ship filled to the brim, they were finally ready to head back home. They couldn't wait any longer, otherwise the fish had a chance to go on the way, which would mean all of their efforts would have been in vain after all. They encountered very dangerous waters on their way home that were almost impossible to navigate. They had to make a detour to avoid taking a chance that they might never come back from. This added at least 2 more days to their trip. What this meant was first going back into the direction they came from to avoid the stormy water from overtaking them. When they were out far enough, they would be able to circle around the storm. They knew, however, that this would cost them much more time. This also did not mean they would be sailing through calm water, however. The storm is faster than they are, but it would mean that they would probably avoid the roughest and most dangerous parts of it. Luckily for them, the calculation of the captain were correct. Exhausted from being out on sea for this long and suffering from a severe shortage of fresh water and food, the crew was desperate to get home. But they knew that any land was still at least a couple of days away. They would have to hold out a little longer. They were lucky to be a well-stocked fishing boat at that point because there was plenty of fish to eat, and the water they managed to catch from the storm would, at last, make sure they would not dehydrate completely on the trip if they managed to make haste back to shore. The rest of the crew spend their days playing cards or dice and looking out over the endless sea. With a bit of luck, they would sometimes see some sea life surface, but this is rare. They are bored and can't stand the smell of fish anymore. Luckily, they are only about a day away now, if what the captain says is true. They can't see any land as of yet, but they had spotted a couple of boats in the distance a while ago. They considered approaching them and asking them for some water, but this would only delay them further. And because they couldn't be sure that the people on the other boats had any water to spare or would even be willing to share it with strangers, they decided to not take the risk and just head straight for the shore, determined to not let anything delay them more. Then suddenly they see one of the most beautiful sights appear right in front of their eyes. They see land far in the distance, just reaching above the horizon. The crew is ecstatic and seems to have a whole new burst of energy. They are screaming and celebrating like they won the lottery. With all the crews celebrating, one member of them can't take their eyes off the land. He was finally about to get home, but then something emerges from the water that catches his eye. It takes him a few moments to adjust to what he's seeing. It is a beautiful and obviously mature dolphin. Now this in itself is not a rare sight. They had seen multiple already on their trip, and almost every time they went out on the water, they would encounter a multitude of these incredible creatures. These majestic creatures are fairly common where they would normally catch their fish. They always had to be careful to not accidentally catch one in their nets. This had happened to them a couple of times before, but they were luckily always able to set it free again in relatively good condition. But there was something off about this particular dolphin. It seemed to be struggling to move or to dive back down. It only takes the perceptive crewmate a couple of moments to understand what is going wrong for this normally so majestic creature. Its tail seems to be caught in a big and heavy fishing net. This was probably discarded by another fishing boat, or maybe even by them. They too had lost a couple of their nets and other equipment to the unpredictable mistress that is the ocean. The dolphin looked extremely tired from carrying the heavy net around. Who knows how long he had been trapped in it? Obviously long enough to be separated from his pod, because there were no other dolphins in sight when the crewman was looking around. When the crew member fully realized what he was witnessing, he immediately alerted the other crewmates. It took a little while for them to understand what was happening, because they were still celebrating the sighting of land to their heart's content. The crew spotted the dolphin just as it was about to pass them. This would have been their chance to catch it and help it if they were closer, but there was still a sizable distance between them and the creature. It would be impossible to quickly catch it. When everybody on the ship was fully aware of the presence of the struggling dolphin, it had already passed them by. It was going in the opposite direction to them. Now that everybody knew what was going on, they had a decision to make. Was it worth it to them to turn this boat around and chase after the helpless dolphin in an attempt to catch it and free it from the net? If it meant that they would be away from land and home even longer, or did they just want to go home and not bother helping the animal? The decision was made within a second, and everybody on the boat wholeheartedly agreed with it. They would go after the dolphin. Some people might think that because they catch fish for a living, that fishermen have no regard for the lives of marine creatures. Fishermen appreciate and respect the sea. It and all the life in it are incredibly important to their survival, and they know that they can't live without it. It is kind of similar to a farmer and his cattle. He loves all his animals even if he knows that he will eventually have to kill some of them. The captain quickly turns the boat around and starts chasing after the dolphin. They see that it is trying to dive multiple times, but it almost comes back to the surface almost immediately. It probably can't propel itself downwards with its tail trapped like that. The boat quickly catches up to the dolphin, and at first it tries to get away by changing direction. But after a couple of attempts, the dolphin just stays next to the boat calmly. The fishermen don't know if this is because the creatures know they want to help, or because it's just too exhausted to get away. The fishermen don't have a good way to get the creature on board, so they decide on using the very thing that is seemingly hurting this dolphin so much. They throw out their own net, and to their surprise, they manage to trap it on their first attempt. They pull the obviously tired creature on board without it struggling or protesting too much. When it's on the deck of the boat, they quickly undo it from their own net before they can turn their attention to the net that is still wrapped around its tail. It only takes two of the stronger crew member to hold the creature relatively still, while the deck leader takes his knife and carefully starts cutting the net away. It doesn't take him long to cut a couple of the trick thread, which allows the whole net to come off easy. They quickly inspect the creature, to see if it doesn't have any other injuries related to this unfortunate incident, but it seems to be in good condition. It is also already starting to look and act more lively now that its tail is completely freed again. The crew members quickly open the ledge on the side of the deck, and with a little pushing and shoving, they manage to get the dolphin off the boat and back into the water. It immediately dives deep down, and they can't see it anymore. Satisfied with their work, they quickly close the ledge and start cleaning up the deck, while the captain sets course back in the direction of land. This whole ordeal probably added at least 5 to 6 more hours to their journey, but everybody on the ship knew they made the right decision. On their way back to shore, they suddenly see a dolphin jumping alongside the boat. They are almost positive it's the same dolphin they had just saved. With how intelligent these creatures are, it is not unlikely that this was its way of thanking the crew for saving it. With the crew finally back on shore after a long and hard journey, they now not only have a lot of fish to sell that ensures them a well-deserved paycheck, but they also leave the boat with a great story to tell and an unforgettable experience. They now have a great story to tell.